Hello and welcome to In Depth. I'm Tina Jha. Ever wondered how taking a trip to space might be? Well, it may sound like a thing of science fiction, but a lot of work is being done to make it a viable holiday option for people. For more than a decade, a number of companies have been working to make commercial space tourism a reality. On 13 December 2018, Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic company moved a step closer towards this goal. It flew the spacecraft Spaceship Two more than 50 miles above the Mojave Desert in California on Thursday, climbing into the edge of space for about a minute. It landed successfully after touching the required altitude. Now, if this flight takes a commercial turn, Virgin Galactic promises a stunning view of the planet from space and also some moments of weightlessness. Today in In-Depth, we try and understand what space tourism is. When did it start? What can the space tourism look forward to? And the benefits and future of flying tourists into space. In 1967, Baron Hilton, then president of Hilton Hotels, envisioned a galaxy lounge on the moon where visitors could enjoy a martini while looking at the stars. Since then, space tourism has taken many steps towards the goal. Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic is offering a 2.5-hour flight with 6 minutes of weightlessness and some incredible views of Earth from outer space. Now, this will not be cheap. No scientific qualifications will be needed, except for a few fitness tests and training ahead of the flight. Commercial space tourism might be a reality soon. On 13 December 2018, a Virgin Galactic rocket plane reached space and returned safely to the California desert. The brief voyage marked the first human flight to space by a commercial space operator. No spacecraft with people on board has taken off from US soil since the American Space Shuttle program ended in 2011. The accomplishment gave Virgin Galactic founder Richard Branson a victory in the highly competitive world of commercial space tourism. The British billionaire started Virgin Galactic in 2004 with an objective to ferry tourists on short flights into space.
Well, we've been to space, and that's something that we've been looking forward to for 14 years since we started Virgin Galactic. It's a historic day. I think it's the first commercial spaceship company to actually put people into space. And yeah, we're on top of the moon at the moment.
Virgin Galactic's space plane called Spaceship Two included two phases. The spaceship that was attached to a cargo aircraft. It took off around 7:15 a.m. local time from the airport in the Mojave Desert. It had two pilots on board, Mark Stuckey and Frederick Sturckow, both in the cockpit. The craft also carried research payloads that simulated the weight of carrying passengers. It soared at speeds topping out at 2.9 times the speed of sound, that is around 2,200 miles per hour, through nearly 3 layers of Earth's atmosphere to reach space. After ascending to about 43,000 feet, the two craft separated and the pilots fired up the rocket. According to the company, Spaceship Two climbed above 271,000 feet or about 51.4 miles. The US Air Force and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration consider 50 miles up to be the edge of space. Years ago, Virgin Galactic had sparked interest in blasting tourists and small satellites into space using cheap rockets. But an accident in December 2014 forced the company to maintain a low profile. Now, with the successful test flight, the space venture company is expected to accelerate commercial efforts to send tourists and small satellites aloft using low-cost rockets.
My best guess is that I'll be in space within within a few months from now. We'll obviously get all the data back from this spaceship. I'm sure there will be a few tweaks that will need to be done to the spaceship. We'll then do another flight. We'll get the data back from that. We'll then do another flight with our brave test pilots. Once they're 100% sure that every box is ticked, then I plan to go up. And then we have 700 people who signed up to go into space, and we'll start sending those people to space. And we're building new spaceships, so that will hopefully enable thousands more people to be able to go to space one day. So initially, it will be expensive to go to space. We're talking about a few $100,000. But in time, as we build more and more spaceships and more people travel, the price will come down. And ultimately, we hope that it'll be affordable to many people watching this program. But we're going to need to build quite a lot of spaceships to enable that to happen.
For around $250,000 a seat, Virgin Galactic seeks to offer thrill rides featuring majestic views of the Earth capped by a few minutes of weightlessness. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. There's a lunar tourism mission also on the anvil. Big Falcon rocket manufactured by Elon Musk's SpaceX will loop around the moon in 2023 if everything goes as planned. Japanese Yusaku Maezawa will be the first private passenger as well as the sponsor of the Big Falcon rocket. On 17 September, founder of SpaceX Elon Musk announced that the first private passenger had signed up to fly around the moon in SpaceX's enormous Big Falcon rocket. Japanese billionaire Yusaku Maezawa will be the first passenger to ride around the moon in the Big Falcon rocket in 2023. He's also sponsored the historic flight. Elon Musk first unveiled SpaceX's fully reusable Big Falcon rocket spacecraft in 2016, when it was still called the Interplanetary Transport System. The design was refined in 2017. This final design, however, is larger than the 2017 version and will stand 118 meters tall when fully assembled. It can fly up to 100 people and carry 90 metric tons of payload in space. BFR is essentially a massive spacecraft suited for long-distance travel. The interior is custom configured for each trip with areas for cargo, emergency air, supplies, living quarters and zero-gravity entertainment. The mission will launch from Earth to loop around the moon and may fly further ahead into space to see both the moon and Earth from a distance. After this, the crew will return to Earth in a vertical landing procedure. The trip is set to last for 5 days. The test schedule for BFR is as follows: an half-an-hour flight next year and then a high-altitude, high-velocity flight in 2020. There will be plenty of tests without passengers, but the actual first manned flight to orbit will be in 2023 if all goes as planned. Estimated cost of BFR is $5 to $10 billion. There are 8 carefully selected passengers. The first passenger, Yusaku, has purchased the entire flight and wants travel with artists. The entrepreneur said he wanted his flight to have a special meaning, one that will serve his goal of promoting peace across the world. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And time for a short break on the program. We'll be right back. Do stay with us.
Today we'll analyze why is it so important to have a policy to authenticate e-pharmacy.
To ensure that the quality of medicines that are manufactured and sold in India are as per the standards given under the Drugs and Cosmetic Act.
So without having tight rules in place and tight, the way in which to do business, if you will, what happens is we are basically putting in danger all of our lives.
Do you think that these e-pharmacies can provide the benefit to the consumers?
Because the whole middleman, the whole bunch of costs actually come down because we are able to sort of go directly to the consumer.
There is a provision to take a legal as well as the administrative action against the e-pharmacy holder.
Watch The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira, at 9:30 p.m.
The prolific British poet and story writer Joseph Rudyard Kipling, one of the first masters of short stories in English. In 1894 appeared his Jungle Book, which became a children's classic all over the world. Kim, the story of Kimball O'Hara and his adventures in the Himalayas, is perhaps his most felicitous work published. Set in and concerned with India he had come to know and love so well. In 1907, Kipling became the first English language writer to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature.
Welcome back. You're watching In Depth. Virgin Galactic and SpaceX are not the only ones planning to take tourists into space. In fact, they're not even the first to do so. Space Adventures has sent 7 tourists into space so far, with American businessman Dennis Tito being the first one to do so. But all these flights have been on the Soyuz rocket to the International Space Station. The companies now developing space tourism programs have plans to venture deep into space with luxury space hotels and some short duration missions. Let's take a look at the history as well as the future of space tourism.
Dennis Tito, a 60-year-old American businessman, scripted his name into history books when on April 28, 2001, he left the Earth's atmosphere to spend nearly 8 days in space. He stayed aboard the International Space Station, spending $20 million to do so. NASA objected to Tito's sojourn into space, citing his short training period, which they thought was insufficient for the task being undertaken. However, the tourism company Space Adventures finalized a deal with the Russian agency Roscosmos and got Tito a seat in a Soyuz. Tito thus became the first man to travel to space purely as a tourist. Since then, there have been just 6 other space tourists, all traveling aboard a Soyuz to the ISS. The last one was Guy Laliberte, the founder of Cirque du Soleil, who flew into space in 2009. This early space tourism era was short-lived because the crew aboard the ISS was doubled in 2009, leaving no room for visitors on the station. But the 7 space tourists won't be alone for long. Numerous private companies are engaged in developing their own space tourism programs. Besides Virgin Galactic and SpaceX, there is Blue Origin, Amazon's Jeff Bezos' private spaceflight venture. In addition to these heavy hitters, there are several other smaller companies offering tourists a chance to reach space. In April this year, Orion-Span announced its plans for the world's first luxury space hotel, the Aurora Station. Using the company's proprietary technology and construction methodology, the Orion-Span will begin construction in space in 2021. The proposed space station will have 2 private suites where a total of 4 guests and 2 crew can stay. Anyone opting to stay at the hotel will have to undergo a training program before they can fly into space, with the company bringing down the traditional 24-month training program to just 3 months. It will cost guests $9.5 million per person for a 12-day mission. And if you thought that was expensive, then let's tell you that this is one of the more affordable ways to temporarily live in space. Historically, space tourists have paid between $20 million and $50 million to stay aboard the ISS. Blue Origin's New Shepard program seeks to launch passengers in a capsule atop a rocket. The company is aiming at early 2019 for their first flight with humans on board. The short duration missions that will last approximately 11 minutes are expected to require a day of training. Tickets for this flight are rumored to be in the low hundreds of thousands of dollars. Space Adventures, the company responsible for launching all 7 space tourists so far, continues to promote new missions, including a spacewalk at the ISS and a trip around the moon. Space Adventures does not have a spacecraft of its own, but it has long partnered with Roscosmos to send its guests into space via the Soyuz. Roscosmos has recently begun developing its own commercial space program. The Russian agency plans to build a luxury space hotel module for the ISS by 2022. Guests at this hotel will be treated to private living quarters with 4 bedrooms, hygiene and medical facilities and a lounge. Prices will range from $40 million for a 1 to 2 week stay to $60 million for a month-long stay that would include a guided spacewalk by a cosmonaut. The program, being designed by Cosmocourse, will also use a reusable rocket. The flights will be short-duration missions, about 15 minutes long, with just a few minutes of weightlessness. The training program will last 3 days and the entire package will cost approximately $2 lakh to $2.5 lakh. Axiom Space offers on-orbit research and manufacturing, but its ultimate goal is to launch a commercial space station like the ISS. The company plans to send modules to the ISS by 2021 and establish its own space station by 2024. Private clients will be able to book 7 to 10-day missions to this station. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Going to space is a rare privilege, but it also takes a lot of preparation. The rigorous physical training to endure extreme conditions, stamina, strength, familiarity with equipments are some vital elements before undertaking this adventure ride. In our next report, let's talk about the things to know before space travel.
Going to space is a rare privilege, but also a costly affair that involved a lot of work. Only the world's wealthiest governments have the expertise and deep pockets to pull off space trips. The trips are undertaken by highly trained astronauts in peak physical form. That's roughly 500 people so far. But now, the announcement of SpaceX has raised the prospect of space vacations. Space travel takes loads of energy, stamina and strength. One faces extreme levels of pressure and weightlessness. General fitness is important and even required. Apart from space camp or zero-gravity flights, a medical exam is necessary to even qualify for space travel. For starters, a person needs to be between 160 centimeters to 185 centimeters in height and between 50 kilos to 95 kilograms in weight. Apart from physical conditioning, they have to go through a rigorous training program, similar to what all astronauts go through. Most programs last 8 to 10 days and can be done even without the intent of space flight. The programs get people mentally prepared for space flights and also help them to understand the technology space tourism. Space simulators used by cosmonauts teach the basics of being at the controls of a space shuttle.
There are 2 kinds of space tourism at this present time on Anvil. One is earlier 4 people, including Elon Musk and Ansari, many people went, about 4 people went. They had to go through a rigorous training like any other astronaut and they were launched through the traditional space missions and they reached space and then came back within few days. So you have to be fit, young, etc.
Space travel requires toughness, aptitude and detail-oriented nature. Every single malfunction in theory or experience is reviewed in training. Space tourists have to master the ins and outs of their vessel, from stowing supplies, preparing a meal or dealing with waste receptacles. Clothes are chosen months in advance before a space flight. Further, any equipment or food item has to be checked out long before the trip. The space age may be entering a new phase, but it's the question of safety that is a hurdle to tourism. Companies involved don't reveal the cost of a flight, but it could well be in tens of millions of dollars. Virgin Galactic asks for a deposit of over £2 lakh for a seat to space and membership of the future astronaut community. But as technology advances, the price is expected to come down and flights become less expensive. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
That's it from us on today's edition of In Depth. You can also watch our episodes online on YouTube and Twitter and get back to us with your feedback and suggestions. Thanks for your time.